I'd love to talk a little bit about my research. You'll have to stop me so I don't speak too much because I love my research. I'm interested in the neurobiological basis of individuality. And I'm interested in that particularly as individuality emerges in the beginning of life and throughout adolescence. And in particular, how in the nature-nurture question, how nurturing has an influence on individuality and how that in turn brings about changes in circuitry, in molecular composition within the brain. Right now I'm looking at the role of stress exposure during adolescence and the impact it has on an individual's ability to cope with it or of their vulnerability, and what are the molecular explanations for that differences in vulnerability versus resilience to stress. I was most fascinated to learn that individuality could be explained at the biological, cellular, molecular level. Um, some of it is based on my personal experience. I found that I had undergone major changes as I changed the country in which I lived. So I was born in the U.S., having naturally acquired English as my native tongue. And at the age of 5, I moved to Japan. At that point, I was only speaking English and didn't know any Japanese. But by the time I came back at age 11, I was now only speaking Japanese and had forgotten my English language. And then I had to regain the native tongue, which is now again English. So it was interesting to me that something like language, which is learned so naturally, why it is that why is it that it's so natural, so effortless, and why is it that language acquisition becomes more difficult later in life? So nowadays, I'm trying to learn Arabic. I tried learning Russian, Italian. None of it worked out. I'm not able to learn it. But French that I learned in high school has stuck with me a little bit. But English and Japanese are now here with me to stay. But somehow, during the ages of 8, 5, and 11, I was able to gain and lose and then regain. So what got me interested in is thinking, what happened to me, and why is it that my parents are, my father especially, is having so much more difficulty learning English when he came to the U.S. at age 25. And just when I was beginning graduate school, it became evident that such a question could be answered, and there was a hope for answering that question using at the level of molecular and cell biological resolution. And that got me hooked, thinking that if we could understand the molecular basis for native tongue, acquisition of the native tongue, then won't we have a way of understanding how we are different in personality, motor abilities, ability to play the violin or be a great basketball champion? What is it about the exposure and experience during the earliest part of life that influences our lifelong capacity, mental and physical? Okay, so as you had said earlier, many people have worked hard to dispel the myth about, oh, there's only 10% of the brain ever used at once, so I know that one's taken. So I've been looking for another one. And I think another myth is about the regeneration of neurons. I had learned that the peripheral nervous system can regenerate, while the central nervous system cannot. And so if we lose a neuron, that's it. But I've learned that to some extent that is not quite true, that there are neurons even in the central nervous system that that retain the ability to be regenerative through life. Maybe not at the level of the cell body, but even if the axon is severed, that axon can regrow. And these are the very special group of neurons, the neuromodulatory neurons, such as the noradrenergic, the serotonergic, and the dopaminergic neurons. If you sever those axons, they can regrow, even in a completely adult brain. So what is it that's different about those neurons as opposed to other neurons that are famously not regeneratable? It could be that the neurons that are able to regenerate are the ones that are not so heavily myelinated or not myelinated at all. And myelin, which is really helpful to have for quick axonal conduction, may impair regeneration ability. Pretty much. Oh, I think, and in my very modest way, I was rebellious, and that's what got me to become a neuroscientist. There were certain courses where professors taught you how things are, and you were taught to train to memorize and regurgitate. What was really different about neuroscience is that it was such a field in its beginning. Everyone can be a pioneer, and so you can be a rather um, young student and challenge professors. I love that. I didn't like being the person who had to learn from senior professors and just learn how things are. I love the ability to be able to challenge. And within the science field, it seemed that neuroscience was the most in that way. It was in its youth, maybe in its infancy, and therefore there were hardly any dogmas, actually. Everything that we found out was new, and dogmas were, there was just not enough time for it to be dogmatic. We were learning things, and the next year we were relearning and turning them over. And the fact that all of us were much more equal in standing and could challenge what we thought was true to be no longer true, it was revolutionary in a way, and that's what I loved about neuroscience. And I was that way, I think, in other ways, like socially as well. I had to commute from home because my parents didn't trust me to live in a dormitory because they felt that I might become corrupt, and I had to fight them to be able to start living in a dormitory, and perhaps I did become corrupt very quickly after that. But all of this, doing things that were not allowed, was the funnest thing to do, and I tried to do that within the constraints, so I wasn't breaking the law, but trying to find that envelope and break it as much as I could. I think as aspiring, meaning at the very beginning, it's important to find out, to think how well matched that person is to the career. I find that first of all, for a person to be a scientist, that person should be a kind that's always asking questions. The how and why, and so if you're the kind of person that can't just take a this is the way it is kind of an answer, but ask why it is that way, and is that useful for society or for individual, that person has the little bit of the core of what makes a scientist. I think for a person who has already figured out that he or she has an inquiring kind of mind, make sure that you keep doing that because you might get busy with a lot of coursework. Make sure you have enough space in your life to ask a new question every day. And then I think it's important for that scientist to have two parts to himself or herself. Be bold and also be solid. What I mean about being bold is, again, challenge dogma. So you had a really wonderful question. What are the dogma? Be that person that tries to differentiate what is dogma and what is the basis for that, or is it dogma? Is it really well founded? Questioning, questioning, questioning. Allow anecdotes to excite you for questions, but be solid, meaning don't just settle for an anecdote. Don't just settle for a single case story, but make sure that you understand how anecdote is converted to solid finding based on sampling of a large body of observations or repeated measures. So find a good balance between something exciting and bold, and then solidified with very sound methods. That's I think it's always a balance between those two. They should immerse themselves in that activity for at least a semester or maybe a couple of years. I think the doctoral program is very different from a medical training or anything else because there's a lot of unknown. I think its doctoral program is suited to a person who's not uncomfortable with what will happen to him or her 5 years down the road, because there's no guarantee that when you embark in research that you're going to get a finding that's what you had expected, because your hypothesis could be totally wrong. There's also no guarantee that you're going to get a finding that's really exciting. It might be exciting, or it may be exciting to you, but not exciting to the 99% of the people out there. It could be very personal. So there's no guarantee besides the fact that if you work hard enough and are flexible enough in the change of directions, probably 5, 6, 10 years down the line, you can get a PhD. But I think a doctoral program is really for a person who has insatiable need to ask questions. The why. Why is it this way? What is it? What are the molecules, or not molecules, it could be anything else, the mode of explanation, but why and how. The person who has an insatiable need for more knowledge, loves to be really, feels empowered by being knowledgeable. That kind of person is well suited to a doctoral program. But if a person needs a guarantee that X number of years down the line, that person will get the PhD and will get the recognition and will get a certain job, that it may not be for that person. One more thing I might say is that it may not be financially comfortable, but it's not financially uncomfortable either. Compared to the starving artist, I think the scientist to be in this community is supported enough to be comfortable. May I speak of 3 people?
Yes.
Thank you. Because I have had different kinds of influences at different times. I think in the youngest time when my soul was forming at age 3 to age 10, it was my grandmother, because she was a person who had a tape measure around her neck all the time. Anyway, this is the image I have of her. And she was always sewing. She would look at an image, a style that she liked in a newspaper, and then use that image and sew a piece of clothing. And in that, she was needing to be very precise, and that's why she had a tape measure, but she also was attracted to the flair and the fashion. So it was a combination of creativity with precision that was required in the fashion business that I saw in her. It wasn't a business. I mean, she just sewed for herself and for her children, but the fact that a single person can have that combination of precision and creativity was what I think was wonderful, and I found in myself now in science. So I would identify my grandmother in the earliest time point. And then I think I was lucky enough that during my undergraduate years, I encountered a person named Jonathan Winson, who has passed away. I volunteered in his lab and then became a technician in his lab for a year and a half. With him, I chatted every day about neuroscience in general. And that was especially important because there were no neuroscience courses offered in the college, as I told you, because it was that long time ago. But he exposed me to a wide field of neuroscience and encouraged me to go to the Society for Neuroscience so I could meet even more scientists there. And then in my graduate years, I was lucky to have a mentor. His name was Phil Sikovitz. He also died already from old age. What was important was to have a mentor who was supportive and protective when I needed that, but also somebody who could let go and see me attain independence. So he knew how much support to give me when I needed and how much independence to give me when I was ready for it. And so in a way, he was like a good parent that not everyone is fortunate enough to have, but I did. And so now that I'm in the position of mentoring others, I feel that I want to be those 3 people to the person that I mentor. I want to encourage the person to be precise but creative, like the way my grandmother was. I want to be that person that helps to expose the student to all that there is to discover in the field of neuroscience. And finally, I want to be the mentor that provides the support when needed and allows the student to blossom and attain individuality and independence in research when that person is ready. I also think that some of my need to be independent and creative comes from the revolutionary ways that my mom and dad were. They allowed me to be revolutionary in my own way at home and while in college, and I thank them for that. I hope that there are many more parents like that, because those are the people that allow for the future generation of scientists who feel secure enough to be bold and creative and revolutionary.